lap welds, plug welds, butt welds, all kind of stuff going on. It's fabrication season, and I thought it would be great to kind of launch it out with an episode on our Talk About It Tuesday, talking about the different kinds of welds and why I use them. Now, for the old timers here on the channel, you've heard some of this before, but it's always good to circle around, especially since we've got so many new subscribers here on the channel. Let's get into it. I'm Mike, and you're watching My Car Shop. If you've not been around the channel for very long, one thing you will quickly discover is that there's always a context, and contexts aren't always those text messages you get from your relatives in prison. The context to a lot of what I do is going to depend upon, ultimately, the final goal for the project. So the things I'm doing on the Forsyth Duster are different than the things I'm doing on the Stitches Challenger, versus different from what I've done on the 47 Ford, versus different from what's been done on the 69 Charger, versus different from what's been done on the 68 Pro Street Dark GTS, versus different from what's going on the Golden Mullet project. Man, there's a lot of projects, and I haven't even scratched the surface of everything we're doing. Stitches has definitely been a showcase for a lot of techniques, and if you're not familiar with that project, go over to the playlist. There's a couple hundred episodes on our 1970 Dodge Challenger that we call Stitches. Most of what I've done there has been pretty rude and crude kinds of patchwork and fabrication, hence the name Stitches. But there's a method to my madness that we've talked about before. It's not a 7-figure Hemi car. It was a 318 car that came out of a junkyard with a car piled on top of it. It was a rusted out piece of crap that was gone from the firewall to the rear bumper, and I decided, rather than spending all kinds of money on buying replacement panels, let's see exactly how inexpensively we can redo this car by hand fabricating all of the pieces we need for the car, with a few exceptions. We hand fabricated rear unibody frame rails out of 18 gauge sheet metal. We hand fabricated all of the floor pans in that car, except for the trunk floor, out of 20 gauge sheet metal. We've hand fabricated almost everything except for 3 parts so far. We did not hand fabricate the quarter panels. There's a reason. And we did not hand fabricate the trunk floor because a channel viewer felt sorry for me and donated it to the channel. He bought me a nice Sherman part that fits right in real nice. It's in the car now. It's all done. We just got to finish it up. The point of today is to talk about welding, though. Mostly butt welds versus plug welds and overlap welds. Well, plug welds can be overlap welds. So let's stick to the two things of overlap and butt weld. If you're familiar with Fitzy fabrication, you've seen him do something called the cut and butt. I've also done that for years. It's nothing he invented. He's just kind of become famous for it. He's got an amazing, good fabrication channel. If you want to see some really master craftsmanship, go watch Fitzy. He does everything with simple tools, just like mostly I do. But on Stitches, we've done a lot of just overlap welding, where we flange a panel or we overlap panels like we did in the floor pans and weld it on both sides and call it good. There's a reason for that. Number one, it's not a big dollar car. But number two, a unibody car is a little different beast than a full frame car. And a lot of times I'm concerned about doing butt welds, especially onto metal that is rusted as much as Stitches was, and even those original factory panels are no longer 20 gauge because they're rusted so thin. I find that a nice 1/2 inch overlap weld gives a lot more strength. And yes, I'm lazy and it's faster, but my main thing is strength. If you've ever had a unibody car jacked up with a jack stand under the front swing perch and nothing supporting the rear end of the car, there's already a little flex in the body. And even though everything put in that car is new, with the new frame rails and everything, a lot of structural integrity on that car comes right through the inner rocker, the quarter panel, and the trunk floor extension that goes down to meet the quarter panel. In other words, it's a unibody, which means that a large part of the structural integrity of that car comes from the body sheet metal itself. Yes, I know that doing a cut and butt on the quarter panel would give me a much nicer finish. I've been criticized for such booger work there, but there's a reason I do what I do, and I'm explaining that to you now. as I've explained before some places, I find that weld is just stronger with some plug welds, and then welding it in like that. Yes, you end up with just a little bit more mud in there, but on a car like Stitch's, who the heck cares? It's not a big, huge dollar car. It's a fun car that's going to look super nice and win some shows, but it's a driver quality car that I just plan to beat the crap out of. It's going to turn out a lot like Black Beauty, a 69 Dodge Charger. In fact, it's going to be a twin car to that with a black vinyl roof, a black satin stripe, all black, same wheels and tires, big block 4-speed, etc., etc. In other words, they're going to be sister cars. I want people to understand, if they're willing, that it's not that I can't do the other work. It's not that I can't do the higher quality work. It's not that I can't do the nice cut and butt finishes that virtually show you zero location where there was a weld made. I've demonstrated it on that car. I've demonstrated it on other cars. But I don't find on cars like the Stitch's Challenger that it's worth the time and effort. It's going to make zero difference in the end value of that car when it's done. Remember, we have 13 projects we're building here in the shop that are all our own, and those all take time. And if I can cut some corners and still turn out a really good, respectable piece of work, then I'm going to take time. I'm going to go ahead and cut those corners and save that time so I can devote it to another project. I do have 2 more projects that are, one is at the shop now and another one's coming. You guys haven't even seen yet. Let's face it, I'm not getting any younger. I'm wrapping up my 59th year of life. Be celebrating that by the time, I probably will have already celebrated that by the time you see this. How much more time do I have left? I figure I've got probably another 10 years to build cars. Now, I'm pretty confident that I can build all of these cars within that amount of time. But if I can save a few bucks and if I can save some time, I'm definitely going to do it. I mean, we talked about cost savings. We would have about $14,000 into the Stitch's Challenger had we purchased everything that's on the list. That episode's here for that car, brand new. That includes trim, bumpers, lights, all that stuff, so don't get me wrong. But for everything I've spent on that car, comparison for comparison, 14 grand versus about $3,000. We've saved $11,000 by doing this car on the cheap and by hand fabricated. Yes, we have more time in it. I get that. But to me, it's worth every bit of that money, because frankly, I wouldn't be as far along as I am if I had to spend it, because I don't have it. There's an episode in the floor pan on the passenger side rear seat floor pan area where I did do a cut and butt with a piece of replacement metal that came either out of a 71 and up Charger or a Barracuda, because the floor pan is smaller. Those 2 cars have the same floor pans. The Challenger is 1.5 inches longer, if I remember right. But anyway, I did a cut and butt in that area just to show you that, yeah, I can do it. I've done cut and butts in other places as well. I did some cut and butt work on, actually I did some plain butt welding on John's 66 Charger. I don't know, there's so much stuff here on the channel. It's hard for me to keep track of everything I've done and what I filmed and put in episodes. But there's always a method to my madness when it comes to doing this stuff, for sure. There's always a method to that madness, that if it's stronger, faster, better, even though it maybe doesn't turn out quite as good and requires just a couple more mils of mud, then I'm probably going to do that. As long as I'm not warping the panels and so forth, there's nothing wrong with some Bondo. This idea that we need to build everything where there's no mud, there is not a good high-quality restored car out there that doesn't have some in it somewhere, unless the person's a carriage builder, and those guys are out there. But for the most part, I come from a body shop background. I've worked in body shops, and production environment. It's get her done, get her done. Just like Larry the Cable Guy, you gotta get her done. You will see me doing more cut and butt style stuff on a couple of the other projects that I have coming. 2 of them are trucks, actually. Full frame vehicle, not needing as much structural integrity from the sheet metal itself. I love doing a cut and butt or a good butt weld. Nothing wrong with it. I just prefer a lot of strength, especially in those floor pans in that unibody. I think it's important on a unibody car to get as much strength put back into that rusty thin metal as possible. And I find doing lap welds and welding on both sides, both edges inside, along with some plug welds, is a great way to accomplish that strength and really, I think, makes for almost a piece of reinforcement in the middle of a cheap and dirty Sherman quarter panel patch. And so that's why I do what I do. Yes, it would look nicer with a nice cut and butt or a nice butt weld, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it's not just about what things look like, but it's also about being strong and safe at making it safe. As we say around the channel here, make it safe, make it done, and go have fun. All right, that's it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one. I appreciate you being here, and as always, don't forget, it's important.